Welcome back. Reuters has this. U.S. officials say the Trump administration can use the military to go after Latin American drug gangs that have been designated as global terrorist organizations and has quietly ordered the Pentagon to prepare options for it. The order, signed by Trump, reportedly provides an official basis for direct military operations at sea and on foreign soil against cartels. This would likely mean in the Gulf of Mexico and potentially within Mexico itself. There's other South American countries that might be worth eyeballing as well. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum saying yesterday, flat out, I'll read one of her quotes. She's rejecting this idea plainly. She says, the United States is not going to come to Mexico with the military. We cooperate, we collaborate, but there is not going to be an invasion. That is ruled out, absolutely ruled out, she was quoted as saying yesterday. Hal Kempfer is still here, standing by. Hal, what are the chances of the U.S. performing military operations in Mexico?
Well, it's always a possibility, but I got to tell you, Austin, the problems with that are legion, and the lawyers would look at this, go, "Oh my gosh!" One of the problems is that obviously you're talking with sovereign territory. This is another sovereign country. It's Mexico, and the president of Mexico has made very clear: no, U.S. troops are not welcome. Now, what I will tell you is that over the decades in the war on drugs, we have worked very closely with our Mexican counterparts. There are U.S. law enforcement that are permanently stationed down in Mexico working with their Mexican counterparts. We've done a lot of stuff with intelligence sharing. We've done a lot of stuff with, cooperation, coordination of planning, going after various drug cartels and drug cartel kingpins. We've had a lot of cooperation working with them on the border to make the border a lot more secure. So there's been a lot of cooperation across the board. But if you talk about doing something where you're sending troops down there on special operations, well, you're starting to kind of hint at something that sounds like when we went after Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. Pakistan, an ally, if you will, a country we work with, but we didn't tell them that we were going in there to take out Osama bin Laden. And of course, the fear was that if we said that, the intelligence would get to bin Laden and he'd get moved and nothing would have happened. And that's part of the issue that we have in Mexico. That look, President Sheinbaum would, which he would be first to admit that there's a lot of corruption within the Mexican government. The cartels have a lot of money to buy things. They also have a kind of a policy, which is either you work with us or they'll go after they'll not go after just the officials. They'll go after their families as well. So it's a very coercive thing. So they have their tentacles in a lot of places. And intelligence, one of the easier things that they can share. And so that is one of the reasons that we get frustrated sometimes. And there certainly is a desire to do things more autonomously, particularly when we know that there's a target, a kingpin, if you will, that we could go on and get. We have the means to get it. It's just the legal parameters by which it is. So there's a temptation to do something. And that's what you're saying. By the way, it isn't just Mexico. All right. There are drug cartels throughout Central and South America. You will find them in various Central American countries. Venezuela is a kind of a narco state anymore. So we may, the way this was framed, it kind of opened up. Certainly Venezuela was one of my thoughts. Another place that kind of opened up as a more distant thought is you may notice we have a little bit of tension with Brazil. And there are drug cartels, very violent cartels, or hyper gangs, if you will, fourth generation gangs, or third generation gangs, I should say, that are down there that we may be looking at as well. So it may be more than just Mexico. It may be looking much more broadly at Central and South America.
About 5:25 in the nation's capital. The New York Times reported that U.S. military officials have started drawing up plans for how the military could target cartels. How could unilateral strikes against those groups raise those legal issues that you're discussing? They'll likely be targeting people who pose an imminent threat if they were to carry something out. But what if people are killed who don't pose an imminent threat? Is that where the legal challenges come from that you're discussing?
That's actually a huge problem, and it's tough to contain collateral damage, particularly if you're doing something like a strike mission where you're going and blowing something up. There's that movie Clear and Present Danger that you may recall that was one of the Jack Ryan movies. and they go in to strike a big kingpin meeting of the drug cartel. And of course, as the missiles coming in, you see children come running out of the house and stuff. Well, that is a real world thing. That problem of hitting a strike mission, even when you have certainty that the bad guys you want to get are there, you're not sure about everybody else around them, and you're not sure that something could go astray and you end up killing innocent people. And in that case, you end up with a significant problem because technically, what you've done is could be considered by that country as an act of war. Now, I don't think anybody sees any countries in Central America or even South America successfully prosecuting a war against the U.S. But in terms of international law, doing stuff like that can be considered by that country to be an act of war. What there would have to be, and this is something the U.S. Southern Command out of Miami would be working on, and there'd be a lot of lawyers involved, would be building some sort of structure of memorandums of agreement with these countries that would allow us to move faster. And there is an architecture to do something like this. Joint Interagency Task Force South down in Key West, Florida, has been working with all of these countries for a very long time on intelligence sharing, intelligence collection, and coordinating missions to intercept drugs coming into the United States from all over Central, South America, the Caribbean, the whole thing, even out into the Pacific. So there is a model for this type of cooperation. It has not included things like doing strike missions, special operations missions, something like that. But if there was a legal framework in place, if we could, potentially containerize the information so that it wouldn't get leaked to potential folks in that country that could leak it then to the cartels themselves, if there was some framework, potentially something could be done. But all these respective leaders of these countries would all have to sign off on it. It's not something they would do at this level. It's something you have to do at the highest levels.
So, one thing that occurred to me when I was reading this headline, and you kind of just touched on it, is there precedent for something like this? Has our military targeted cartels on foreign soil?
Well, we haven't targeted, not without some sort of host nation cooperation. All right, we've done a lot of things throughout Central and South America, and I used to be stationed down in Panama, and we had military forces in Panama, and we were doing things all over Central and South America, and still we're very active in the region, but it's done with cooperation with those host nations. This alludes to doing something that would be simply a U.S. operation, if you will, us using our forces and capabilities. And if it does it without the host nation's acquiescence, then that could be considered a hostile act. It could be considered an act of war. And so, therefore, they're going to have to go in. If we're going to do this, we're going to have to get a lot of host nation agreement up front that allows for some ability to coordinate these actions without compromising whatever the plans are, and that will be very difficult. And of course, that would be a desired end state by many to say, look, we can go in there. We see where this, this leader of this Mexican drug cartel is located, and that we could coordinate something even with our Mexican counterparts, for example. We could coordinate something without tipping our hand that this thing is underway. That is theoretically possible. It would be a huge jump in what we're doing now. But I will say this: we do some very interesting stuff working with the various countries to intercept loads of narcotics coming up, whether on ships or planes or whatever. And we've been very successful in that across the board. And that's a huge change from where we were, say, in the late 80s and early 90s. And so we there is a framework for that to be done. This is a different sort of thing. I should mention, though, the political factor is pretty big. The U.S. has done things. This is our sphere of influence, so to speak. We have put military forces in Mexico and Nicaragua and Haiti, and we have had a military presence down there for some time. And it's not something that's necessarily they like to remember in a fond way. And we Marine Corps hymn, the halls of Montezuma. Well, that's Mexico City. All right. Pancho Villa, we chased him around for years. Not only did we not catch him, but as a result of that, in Mexican politics, he became the president of Mexico. So there are those second, third order effects that we have to consider. That's the political dimension.
As soon as this story came out, I was being asked by viewers about this one. This is something that a lot of people are interested in, and it's something that we're going to be tracking closely in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Hal is going to stand by for one more segment. We, of course, watched yesterday this moment as we saw the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan shaking hands, Trump wrapping his hands around their hands as well. We're going to be discussing the peace deal that was